Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salaila Makwidi. The time is 6 minutes before the top of the hour, and we're going to be staying with Gaza and what's happening in that part of the world as trillions are given to Trump. Treasury in the Arab world and a genocide is left to rage unchecked. US President Donald Trump recently walked away from the Gulf with $2 trillion in pledges, while Gaza continues to bleed under relentless Israeli bombardment. In the shadows of political theater, Arab regimes are privately complicit while publicly posturing support for Palestine. Now, revelations from journalist Bob Woodward expose a double speak and betrayal by some of these key Arab leaders. And today on News and Views, we ask, what does it mean when Arab governments not only remain silent, but actively aid in the machinery of genocide? And joining us now is Iqbal Suleman, social justice lawyer, former head of the Law Clinic for Lawyers for Human Rights in Pretoria, and a research associate with Media Review Network, who wrote, I think, a very, very searing new piece on MRN's website. And did not pull no punches. It dived down into the complacency of the Arab states. And if you have time, please head over to their website and check it out. It's really, really a good read. And we'll be diving into some of those political duplicities and the imperial deal making and ultimately, what does it mean for the people of Palestine? Iqbal, assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your show.
Pleasure's all ours. I think, I just want to get into the crux of the matter of your piece. You open with that staggering figure of $2 trillion going from the Arab Gulf states to the United States during Trump's recent trip. In detail, what does this tell us about the current state of Arab complicity in Gaza's genocide? Can we now say they are active aiders of this genocide instead of, seeing them as bystanders who have no say and have no action, when it comes to calling the likes of the United States of America out?
You're quite correct. I think what this exposes is the complete complicity of the Gulf regime with the genocide. Because when you look at the beginning in October 2023, and you look at what Woodward is telling us about these discussions that were happening between the Israeli government and these Arab Gulf regimes, it tells us that there was direct contact with them and they were virtually on board with the genocide. They made it very clear that they want the resistance in Gaza to be defeated. But interestingly enough, and it shows their shrewdness as well, because they say that while they're expressing their support for the genocide, they're telling Blinken that this is something that they cannot protest publicly. So they know exactly what they've been doing. But back to your point, I think this issue of $2 trillion has exposed them for who they are and what they are, particularly at this time where the UN report says that 1 in 5 people in Gaza is suffering from starvation. There's a famine that is happening. The Israelis are being ferocious in slaughtering Palestinian people. We've seen the images of burned children. And at this time, you have the Arab Gulf rulers spending over $2 trillion to Trump. But more importantly, I think, is that when you look at them financing the U.S. government, it is the U.S. government that is financing the genocide in Gaza. All of the weapons, or the majority of the weapons that go to Israel come from the U.S. So any individual who looks at this with an objective mind can see that the Arab governments are guilty, complicit in financing this genocide.
Well, we're just having some difficulties getting your audio right, so I'm not sure if you can just move around a bit, but if it persists, we'll try and maybe get you on a different line. But while you busy
Okay.
trying to figure yourself out. I want to go back to that reference that you made of Bob Woodward's insider revelations about Arab leaders' private conversations with U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. How significant are these kind of disclosures when it comes to understanding the betrayal of Palestine by Arab leaders?
I think it's very significant because it shows the distinction between what the Gulf rulers say publicly and what they say privately. But also, it tells us that what they told Blinken is consistent with their actions. Because if they had even an ounce of compassion for the people of Palestine, they would have at least told Trump, look, here's $2 trillion, but at least stop the war. They didn't do that. So from the word go, you have King Abdullah telling Blinken that he wants Hamas to be defeated, but he makes it clear that he's not going to say that publicly. And then you have also Mohammed bin Zayed. And when you look at his words, I mean, he is very shrewd because he says that we can give Israel time to eliminate Hamas, but it must help us calm our citizens from the images of violence and destruction in Gaza by bringing aid and establishing safe zones. So you see the shrewdness of these rulers, because on the one hand, they want to control the masses, and that's why Mohammed bin Zayed is saying that he wants the Israelis to help them by allowing some aid into Gaza, so as to be able to calm the Arab masses. So I think Woodward's revelations tell us exactly where the Gulf rulers stand on the issue of genocide. They're not just, as you alluded to in your question, it's not just innocent bystanders. They're guilty. They're complicit in the genocide.
My next question to you is: we see the actions and the sentiments of the Arab leaders, but what about the Arab people? You know, the people of the Gulf states. Do they have a role to play in all of this? Are they in support of the actions of their governments? Are they doing enough to call their governments out because of their actions and or their inactions when it comes to the genocide and continued slaughter of the people of Palestine?
That's a very, very good question that you pose. Because on the one hand, you know, one gets the sense that there's clearly a disconnect between the Arab people and the government ruling the Arab world. Right. But there's something that's very interesting because, yes, of course, you have repression in the Arab government. It's not like, let's say, a democracy like South Africa. We have freedom of expression, the freedom to organize, compared to these Arab governments, because often people who speak publicly would face consequences. People who go against the regimes that rule in those countries face consequences. So I think what your question very intelligently is posing is that we haven't seen an outswell or groundswell of public of public support on the street in the Arab world. We haven't seen this in the Arab Gulf countries, and this is also, I think, when we see these images coming from Gaza. I mean, how often have we seen a mother lying next to a dead child asking, "Where are the Arabs? Where are the Muslims?" And while we're quite correct to call out the governments, I mean, there's no doubt that not just the Arab governments, all of the European governments, the American government, they've been financing this genocide, and they've been called out. But we also need to call out the shortcomings within the Arab and Muslim world, amongst the Arab and Muslim public, because this genocide has been going on for 1.5 years now, right? And if every individual was committed to ending the genocide, we would be doing much more than that. We would be bringing the world to a standstill. And it goes for, I think, Muslim publics across the globe. Even I mean, one may even make the criticism in South Africa. You know, the South African government has taken a bold step by taking Israel to the international court. It's a milestone, and perhaps, you know, decades down the line, it'll be something that will be appreciated more than it is now, because when you have the entire Western world complicit in the genocide, doing absolutely nothing to preserve the Genocide Convention, you have a country like South Africa that still upholds the values of international law and human rights. And some might argue later down the line that if South Africa were not to take the action that it took, then, you know, the very principles of international law and human rights would be consigned to the dustbins of history. But back to your point, I think that your question really alludes to the lack of public solidarity or meaningful public solidarity from the Arab masses, because we haven't seen marches in the hundreds of thousands in the Arab states, and they should also, I mean, individuals should be called out for that. At the same time, I think one needs to qualify that these are repressive governments. You know, it's unlike democracies where you have the freedom of expression. But having said that, I think one needs to commend our comrades in the West. And here we're talking about the grassroots solidarity activists, because when you look at the march that happened in the weekend in London, there was approximately 500,000 people, 500,000 people that took to the streets in solidarity with Gaza. And you can see that that's having an effect. It's putting pressure on the government, because if you saw the news last night, there was this clip about the UK, France, and Canada now threatening sanctions on Israel because of the accelerated military slaughter that's happening. The new stage, what the Israeli government has called Gideon's chariot, but which, you know, other individuals have dubbed it as Gideon's genocide. So what we see that the protests make a difference, especially when you well organized, when you come out in the numbers. They put pressure on government, and in the same that we should call out government, I think it's also important to look at what we are doing individually and as organizations, because ultimately, you know, each one of us will face our Creator on the day of accountability. You won't be asked about what I did. I'm not going to be asked about what you did. But each one of us is going to be asked about what we did individually to stop genocide. And we're going to be facing all of these martyrs who have been slaughtered as a result of the genocide. And, you know, that will be a damning day. And there will be no escape from that.
Definitely. I think a very, very important point that you mentioned. I want to touch on the Syrian factor and, you know, the geopolitical reconfigurations that comes with it. Trump met with Ahmed al-Shara, you know, former ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliate, now posing as Syria's head of state. How do we make sense of this alignment, especially in light of Gaza, and also the reports that Syria is looking to normalize relations with Israel? How does all of this fit into the broader betrayal you speak of in your article?
I think it fits into the Israeli project, right? Because ultimately, the goal of the Israeli government is to ethnically cleanse Palestinians, to defeat the Islamic resistance in Gaza and in Lebanon. And so when you look at Syria particularly and practically, Syria plays a very, very important role because the current leadership in Syria has been doing the policing for Israel, and they've prevented arms coming from Iran and into the hands of the resistance in Lebanon. So there's a very important role that Syria plays because as a geostrategic state, Syria can do one of two things. One is that it could be in solidarity with Gaza, but the question becomes again in relation to the Arab rulers as well. You have al-Shara who verbally expresses solidarity with the Palestinian people, but when you look at the actions of the current Syrian government, they seem to be doing the bidding of the U.S. and of Israel.
Mm, 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 mm. Oh, very, very concerning. Iqbal, you made a really, really interesting contrast on the decadence of Arab rulers, with the sacrifice of leaders like Yahya Sinwar and Hassan Nasrallah. How does this frame the moral struggle between resistance and collaboration? Iqbal, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we just lost you there for a moment.
Yeah. What I was saying is that what the genocide in Gaza has shown the world, it made it crystal clear in terms of who the oppressors are and who the oppressed are. When it comes to leadership as well, people can plainly see who are collaborating with the imperialists and with the Zionists, who are the enablers of genocide, and who are the ones who are resisting the genocide. I mean, the resistance in Gaza and in Lebanon have made the ultimate sacrifice. They've sacrificed virtually everything. There's nothing more that they can sacrifice. They've sacrificed.
Iqbal, we are losing you again, and I think this is a very, very important point that you're making. So we wouldn't want to miss it. I'm not sure if you're speaking away from your cell phone's mic.
I've just moved around. Let
There
me
we
know if
go.
you can hear me.
Yes, you're back.
Okay. So what I was saying is that the resistance in Gaza and in Lebanon have made the ultimate sacrifices. They sacrificed virtually everything. There's nothing more for them to sacrifice. They sacrificed their households, their belongings, their children, their fathers, their grandfathers, and their leadership. You know, if you look at the leadership that have been martyred, they've lost their greatest leaders, high-ranking leaders, commentators. They've sacrificed virtually everything. And on the other hand, you see these leaders in the Gulf states living a life of luxury and opulence, and you see the contrast. I mean, in Gaza, people are starving to death. In the Gulf countries, they're having feasts and pig outs, laying out the table for Trump, you know, getting dancers to dance around for Trump. It's all merry and happy and, you know, feasting. And on the other side, in Gaza, people are starving to death. Children are being bombed. Buildings are falling on the heads of women. And the public, I think what's important and what comes to mind is that these leaders who have been martyred have demonstrated the caliber of leadership that is in sync with the standard of leadership that has been demonstrated by the Prophet of Islam, may peace and blessings be upon him. As leaders who are rooted with the people, leaders who fight for social justice, leaders who live simply, leaders who don't accumulate wealth, and leaders who don't sell their people out. I think that's the distinction that becomes crystal clear for everyone to see.
No, definitely. Just in closing, in your closing, in that piece that you wrote, and this was interesting for me to read, as a Black South African, you invoked Malcolm X's distinction between house and field resistance, to put it mildly. Can you unpack this metaphor further, in today's context of
Sure, sure.
Gaza,
So
imperialism,
I must
and
also
resistance?
just add that, Malcolm X yesterday would have been his 100th birthday. And, it's been such a loss when we look at his martyrdom, and he died at the age of 39. But in his short life, he's made such a contribution for the struggle for Black people across the world, and for oppressed people across the globe as well. So, just going back to your question, Malcolm very eloquently phrased the two terms, the and the field Negro. So in Malcolm's words, a house Negro was someone who was enslaved but who worshipped his slave master. He did everything that his slave master wanted. Malcolm gives the example that if there's a fire in the slave master's house, then the house Negro would run around for water, and he'd be willing to do anything, even give his own life to save his slave master. Whereas the field Negro was completely different. The field Negro, when he saw his master's house on fire, in Malcolm's words, the field Negro will pray for a wind to blow the house down completely. So the field Negro was the resistance fighter, the one who hated his master, who wanted to be liberated, who had the dignity, who preserved his honor, and who had that aspiration to be free. And that, I think, Malcolm had that unique ability of in very short and simple words, being able to make these very poignant and specific distinctions between those of us who collaborate with our oppressors and those of us who resist our oppressors.
Definitely, and I think we're going to leave it on that note, Iqbal. Thank you so much for joining us, and really, really insightful and very, very important, conversations that need to be had when it comes to Arab leaders and the role that they're playing in this genocide. And I think you made that very, very patent on your article. Really, really appreciate it, and thank you so much. Looking forward to chat to you again in the so distant future.
Thank you very much as well. Thank you for your time, and take care.
There you go, Iqbal Suleman. I think very, very important points that he's making. If you want to read that really interesting and eye-opening article that he wrote on MRN, please do so. It's very, very important, and he's making some very, very important points. And what stood out for me, obviously, as a young Black South Africans who's been reading the works of Malcolm X, is obviously that distinction between a house nigger and a field nigger, and how to this day they're still very much relevant. And right now, the house niggers are showing themselves. The house niggers are, clear. I mean, for the world to see. We all know who they are. They know themselves. But my question again is the Arab people. It's very, very important that we make the distinction between Arab leaders and the Arab people themselves. It's understandable. Some of the Gulf states are not as democratic as maybe South Africa is. There's no freedom of expression as you'd expect. You can't just criticize the government, but they're not saying anything that could be a sign that they distance themselves from the actions of their leaders. And that's what's concerning for me. So yeah, that's the key takeout. We've come to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for staying with us. It's been another interesting, eye-opening, educational edition of News and Views. I'll be back with you again tomorrow for the Wednesday edition of the show. Inayat Wadi will be with you tomorrow evening on Wednesday nights with Inayat Wadi. Another roundtable jam-packed show that's going to be touching on this very, very topic, Arab leaders and the complacency of this genocide and the role that they have to play, and what should the world be making of it. So yeah, keep your eyes and ears locked and tuned into Salam Media. We'll be giving you the latest coming from the world over. Another interesting story: President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the United States of America. We'll be giving you the latest on that front also. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll be with you again tomorrow. But for myself, Salaido Makudir, and the rest of the team, is bye for now.